Let me ask you about the reaction locally to the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. There are concerns that we could see the conflict in it, not just we've seen skirmishes, but an all-out war now between Israel potentially and Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. It's having a big impact on communities in Australia, including Australia's Jewish community. What's your message to those communities so invested in this conflict on the other side of the world? Obviously, it's not something we see often where an issue of international importance, a war of this magnitude, is felt so keenly locally in a domestic sense.
Yeah, you're right, Kieran. Unfortunately, there has been some division in Australia regarding the war in the Middle East. My message to constituents in the community that I represent is that every Australian has the right to live in peace and to practice their religion and to go about their daily lives without the threat of conflict, without the threat of Islamophobia or anti-Semitism. And there's no place at all for that in Australia. And over the past couple of weeks, I've been trying to work very closely with the local Jewish community. Unfortunately, there have been some anti-Semitic attacks on people's property and on them personally in the area that I represent. So I've been attending shuls, attended a number of Hanukkah celebrations with the local community, going to Hakoah Football Club matches, doing my bit to try and show my support for the local Jewish community. I met with some Jewish representatives yesterday, but equally, we've had some representations from people of Islamic faith about their concerns around Islamophobia, and I've assured them that the government is supportive through upholding laws that ensure that Australians have the right to practice their religion and to live freely and peacefully.
Does the Jewish community feel like you let them down in the particular that support for the resolution at the UN on a ceasefire, that Israel should support a ceasefire? Is that something that disappointed your constituents of the Jewish faith?
Well, I was at Hanukkah celebrations last week and no one expressed that view to me. As I've said to the Jewish community, we've been very consistent in the approach that we've taken as a government, going back to the resolution that was moved in the parliament by the Prime Minister and seconded by the opposition leader that wholeheartedly condemned the actions of Hamas, called for the immediate release of hostages. We continue to do that every day, and recognised Israel's right to defend itself. But that motion also importantly pointed to the fact that you have to uphold international law, and that's the basis upon which Australia acted in the United Nations to ensure that we uphold international law, particularly humanitarian law, around the protection of civilians in a conflict like that.
Greg Sheridan will be joining me shortly to discuss the latest in Gaza and the Middle East. So we'll have more on that in just a moment. Finally, I know you held a news conference earlier in the day, and I need to finish on this note because it's an important message. You touched on the contribution of our veterans earlier in our discussion, but you're urging people, friends, family, loved ones, fellow servicemen and women to check in on their mates over this festive season.
Yeah, thanks for raising it, Kieran. It's a really important issue. We know that Open Arms, the Veterans Counselling Service, are coming up to their busiest period. This is the period where they get a lot of calls from veterans who are doing it tough. And we know that the holiday period is a time where Australians come together with family and friends. But for a lot of Australians, particularly a lot of veterans, they're on their own. They feel isolated, alone, and it can trigger trauma that they may have experienced through their service. So we're asking Australians to think about any friends or mates that they have that are veterans and reach out to them over this holiday period and just check in on them, thank them for their service to our nation and make them feel a part of our society. And likewise, if you know a person or a family that's got an ADF member that's on deployment overseas at the moment and away from their family over Christmas, give them a call, their family, and check in on them and thank them for their service. I think that we need to make sure that we stand by our service personnel and veterans over this holiday period when it can be tough for them.
Absolutely, well said. And we'll talk to you next year. Thanks for everything and joining us throughout 2023. Assistant Defence Minister Matt Thistlethwaite. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Kieran. Have a great Christmas to you and your listeners.